It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Robb Munger, founder, president, and CEO of Exodus Place. Exodus champions transitional housing for homeless men in the greater Grand Rapids, Michigan area. With a background in finance, where he established a leading financial company and manufactured housing, Robb's journey took a pivotal turn when he joined the board of Guiding Light Mission. There he propelled a struggling rescue mission into prominence and transformed a former state corrections facility into Michigan's largest non-governmental transitional housing, offering new beginnings to those in need. A former Army officer, Robb's commitment to service shines through his philanthropic work and innovative solutions in community development. His collaboration with the Salvation Army and Goodwill has showcased an innovative approach to addressing homelessness, demonstrating the impactful change that results from combining passion with action. This initiative has become a testament to the power of collaborative community efforts and making a tangible difference in people's lives. Robb Munger, welcome into the corner office.
Well, thank you. I appreciate this.
Great to have you here. Where do we find you on the globe today?
I live in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
Michigan, right. Got it. And how's the weather up there? Has summer hit already?
It kind of hits and leaves, and then it hits. So today it's sunny and beautiful, so it's fantastic.
Gotta love it. Great. Well, listen, we always kick things off to learn a little bit about our guests' earlier years. So let's start with where you grew up and what your early family life was like.
Well, grew up in Michigan, a little small town, Charlotte, and then transitioned to an even smaller town, which was close to our cottage. So I graduated with, I think there was 47 kids in my graduating class.
Small. Yeah. Was it a kind of a rural farming community? Was it industrial? What was kind of the neighborhood back then?
Well, you hit it right. We had rural farming, so we had the pig farmers, the dairy farmers, and so they were handling crops to supply, food for both. Right. And then we also had the UAW auto workers too.
Of course, yeah.
So
big industry in Michigan. And was your parents involved in either of those industries?
My mom was a teacher, and my father went from being a hardware salesman. He owned several hardware stores and ended up becoming a state farm agent, and became very successful doing that.
Awesome. Brothers and sisters?
Well, one brother.
Yeah, got it. Are you the older of the two, or the younger?
I'm the older.
Okay, awesome. And what were the things that you kind of remember growing up? What did mom and dad instill in you or inspire in you as you were growing up in that rural community?
Yep. Your name counted, so reputation and brand was important. Hard work. I mean, it was drilled into you to work hard. I mean, that was so. I always worked hard ever since I was dusting shelves in my dad's hardware store when I was 4 years old. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah, I mean, so that was, just really hard work. Be honest. Tell the truth, even when it's not always in your favor, and you gotta own up to your mistakes. And really good solid family. there's always challenges, but it was a great family.
Imagine. And we're both men of faith, and we talked about that as being a guiding mission for your life, and guiding mission will come in later as we go through this. But did you grow up in a faith-based family, or did Christ come in your life later?
Well, I did. I did and I didn't.
Yeah,
Okay. I was the typical, we became the family that went to church because that's what you did on Sundays.
right.
And so honestly, I went for play with my buddies, have cookies and donuts, and Kool-Aid after church. That was
Right.
my highlights. Didn't really want to be there for the middle part. And so, yeah, and I knew there was a God.
Yeah.
I just didn't really find God until I was in college.
Came back to you later. Yeah, I accepted Christ at 15, and I took about 35 years of making left turns instead of right turns. So I I know
Yeah.
what that journey's like. What about school years? Was that something that you excelled in? You a good student? What kind of things did you like during that period of your life, the early school
Well,
years?
I had a speech impediment, and then
Mm,
I actually found out in college, my freshman year of college, my second semester, that I'm dyslexic.
right. Wow.
So I always had a challenge, and it frustrated me because I knew I was smart, like I could memorize things if it was spoken to me with audio or visual.
Right.
But if I had to write it down, I struggled. So I graduated with like a C plus out of high school, barely got into college, and then almost flunked out the first semester, and then the second semester, I still remember Professor Dr. Bundenthal pulled me aside after class. He says, "Hey, will you read this?" And he kind of, I don't even remember exactly what he did, but he goes, "You're dyslexic."
Wow.
He goes,
Wow.
and I didn't know what the word was.
Whatever it meant. Yeah,
Ah,
exactly. Isn't that something? Yeah, yeah. In those early years, I mean, it's only been literally the last 10 or 20 years that a lot of that gets identified early. How did you kind of make it through those early years? I mean, without the kind of support, because both reading and writing was a challenge, right? Isn't
oh, it was
dyslexia where,
horrible.
yeah, you can't read the letters get flipped around and it's hard to pronounce and so forth. Gosh, I'd say getting out with a C plus was quite an accomplishment.
Well, it was. It really, Brant, it got to a point where I just figured I knew how to make money.
Yeah,
And so I just looked at it as, well, you know what? I'm just going to do the best I can,
right.
and I can make more money than pretty much everybody else that I was going to school with. And so I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to do this. And if I can get into college, great. If not,
You've got the street smarts to survive, right?
yeah, it's going to
Yeah,
be plan B, and I'm going
right.
to hustle.
Yeah,
So I was confident that way. And I was always a hard worker. I went from, um, didn't do much with my dad's hardware, but my dad had real estate. And so I'd work on his real estate,
uh,
and then I'd worked at,
rentals with like rental properties
yep,
that he had. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah,
multifamily,
yeah.
and like duplexes. It was a gamut of kind of more of a, startup, going from
Right.
small. And, and then actually I worked for a local hardware after he got out of his hardware business. And then I bagged groceries when that he still had that going on. So I held those three jobs, plus I picked up mowing jobs too. We lived on a lake,
Nice.
so
Yeah.
I would I would do mowing jobs. So I was always hustling and then buying and selling some things, so I would make money that way.
Quite the entrepreneur. Were you saving the cash? Were you spending it on, teenage vices for the most part? Was it clear that mom and dad said, "Hey, you better set some aside. You're going to go to college someday"? What was kind of the split? Where did that income go?
Oh, I remember I got a Suzuki RM 125 motorcycle. So
Nice.
that was and I bought well, BMX bikes were just coming out when
Yeah,
I was younger. And so I bought one of those. And once I bought those two, I just pretty much kept banking my money.
good for
Um,
you. Good for you.
And it was funny. I was out on a date once, and somebody said, actually, I ended up marrying my wife. She goes, "What's all that up there?" And she's a CPA now. And I said, "Oh, all my checks." And I wouldn't even go to the bank. I just kept sticking them up in the visor. And I don't know how many thousands of dollars I had sitting up in there. And she goes, "No, you're supposed to cash those because, they're going to cancel them after a
They're gonna
certain period."
expire. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Oh, I love it. I love
So,
it. What about outside of class? You got involved with sports, music, theater, anything like that during those early
um,
years?
football and golf.
Football and golf.
Um,
Okay.
um, football, I had some injuries with my shin splints that just the pain was severe. So
Mm,
I ended up going to golf. Did well there. I was a guy that always had to work to
right.
succeed.
Yeah.
Um, and so I'm not talented. I mean, I've shot some very good rounds, but there's some really amazing talent. I wasn't one of them.
But college was in your future. You decided that was up. Was that kind of mom being a teacher? Is that what led you down that road, or kind of
Yeah.
everybody was doing it at the time? What led you to going forward with that?
Well, the parents said right from the get-go as we were going to college,
Yeah.
and the deal was I worked for my dad on the Saturdays, and then they would pay for college. Now, put it in perspective, college back then was like 2,800 for the whole year.
Wow.
Um, and so it was just expected. And then I had West Point cadet talk to me about going to West Point, and I went through the whole hoops. And even with the bad grades, I was good in I was actually uh, you know pretty darn good in football. I mean, you'd say it'd stand out because they paid for me and another fella to go to additional camps in the summer, and we
Right.
were the two selected. So I mean, um, and then so I think that's that, and the fact I was more in a rural, I probably got in to accepted to West Point. Um, just because of that, it wasn't really because of my grades. And then I bailed on it because
Hmm.
I looked at it as 10 years. I'm like, well, shoot, I'm going to be 28. That's halfway dead. So,
Amazing how we think about those things when we're teenagers, right?
oh, I
Uh,
know. And then I ended up getting recruited to go to Merriam Military Institute, and they said, hey, you can become an officer in 2 years, but then you got to go find a 4-year college to finish in.
mm,
And you have back then with President Reagan, I had the option of going regular Army, which was full time, National Guard, or Army Reserve. So I went,
right.
you know what? I don't know enough about this, and no from not really having anybody in my family in the military, so I took that option.
Yeah, the military reserves, great. So a couple of years there, and then you went to Western Michigan, right? Is that where you got
Yes.
your
Yep.
BS in finance? Yeah.
Yep.
And how did you choose that school? Was that again, close proximity to where you were, or decided you liked the campus, or maybe following your fiance or girlfriend there?
Well, I met my wife there.
Okay.
It was just my grandparents lived on the west side of Michigan,
Uh,
and I liked that better than the Detroit concrete side. West
sure.
Michigan's more had some rolling hills, and
It's nice out there. Yeah.
yeah, it's not it's gotten built up quite a bit now, but back then, I mean, really from Grand Rapids, within 5 minutes, you could be probably pulling, into some hunting land and going hunting. And
Right.
whereas Detroit, you could drive an hour and then just barely be finding some place that you could
Get to
go
the edge of the
hunting.
wilderness. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was
Yeah.
like, I'm more a country guy. So that's
Nice.
how I picked Western.
And did you know studying business made the most sense because that kind of come out of your entrepreneurial background, or what made you choose finance?
It really did. It was
Yeah,
finance with an emphasis in real estate,
right.
and because I always liked and for me, really, finance, it's really, 2 minus 1 gives me 1, and that's my profit.
That's easy, right?
Yeah, and you just now, now I work with my CPA to figure out after tax, profit and the net, and so when you're young, you know what you perceive versus reality are two different things.
That's right. Absolutely. I love it. Now, you mentioned in college you kind of came back to the church. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Campus
Campus
Crusade.
Crusade.
Yep,
Yeah.
for
Wow. They
Christ.
call it Crew now, I think. But yeah, back then it was Campus Crusade.
Yeah, it
Cool.
was. They wanted to talk to me, and I'm like, nah, I don't want to talk to you. And then, my parents had gotten a divorce. My brother had been in a bad car accident,
Hmm.
and then all of a sudden I'm like, I wonder, you just get those questions, and then Greg Chenoweth, I still remember his name, says, "Hey, you got a moment?" And I said,
Hmm.
"Yeah." Um, and so that's really, when I really, for me, commit my
Yeah.
life to Christ.
Greg invited you to a meeting. Is that what happened or an event?
It was a one-on-one deal,
Yeah. Cool.
and I
Great.
didn't really want to go because, by that time I'd been in the military. I liked doing very heavy duty workouts, very aggressive individuals, so physical activities, practice hand-to-hand combat, that type of
Wow.
stuff. And
Yeah.
then, to have to me, it was like, okay, we're going to be doing the kumbaya, holding hands. And I'm like,
Not quite the man's man type of approach, right?
no, it wasn't. It was like totally opposite of who I'm like, no, I'd rather get in a fight and
Right.
mix it up or make some money and get a fast car or buy some real estate, but to sit around and do kumbaya, I'm not. That's not who I am.
How'd it turn you? I mean, what was the kind of defining moment then?
Um, Genesis 1:1 in the
There you go.
beginning,
Yeah,
because I said, when did it start? And he went right to Genesis 1:1, and then John 1:1. In the beginning, God
that's right.
created the Word,
Yeah, the Word
and
was God, and God is the Word. Yeah.
yeah, and you look at that and you go, oh, so everything's created out of the Word, and really, if as a business person in all management, I go to John 1:1
Yep.
because our
Yep.
word, our communication is so critical
So much. Yeah.
to leadership, supporting our staff, having proper communication, whether it's encouragement, motivation. Hey, you need to wake up, partner, because this is serious.
Right.
But and so I looked at that, Brant, and I'm like, okay, this isn't just by accident. I mean, and then he walked me through the Bible and different things, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, this isn't kumbaya. This is
Right.
there's substance behind it, because
Yep.
I don't just hop on. I'm the doubting Thomas more than anything, and so that's how I ended up saying, oh, it's not just me as a narcissistic individual out for myself. There's a bigger God out there.
Yeah, makes sense. And more than just a business too, in relationships. I'm sure in your relationship with your, then girlfriend, fiance, and then wife, and then with your kids, that communication and that word is so important. And there's a lot of respect that's built into that too, based on what you earlier said, right? Your word is your deed. You're kind of brought up with that.
Right. And you
Word is
can
your promise.
break it.
Yeah.
I've said stupid stuff
Yeah.
in some of my relationships, and I've hurt or ruined relationships. And you look at that and you're like, didn't want it to happen.
Yeah.
And nobody wants to talk about that. We want to talk all about the winning and how we are this great.
Right.
But
Right.
I think everybody does something that we unfortunately, um, yeah, wish we hadn't said or,
Yeah,
communicated.
but we learn from it and we do better the next time, right? That's what God wants for us.
Exactly.
Yeah. What was that first job you took out of college then once you got out of Western Michigan?
I started with a commercial real estate company.
Uh-huh.
I was 23.
Wow.
Um, Prior to starting, while I was in college, I made a considerable amount of money in real estate and then also buying and selling and trading different things. I think one time I figured my revenue number was around 80K
Nice.
for my senior year. So I started,
Nice.
and then all of a sudden my commercial, it didn't matter that I understood finances, internal rate of return. I understood so much. But in Grand Rapids, it was pretty much the Dutch mafia here. So if you weren't Dutch, you weren't much.
Right.
And if you didn't go to South Christian High School, then you're not in. And then if you didn't go to Calvin College, then or Hope, then you're not. So I was a total outsider. And then I plugged away at that for about a year, and then finally I said, I'm going to go to residential, and so I worked for a builder,
Hmm.
um, and I made money in the commercial side, but I sold farms, which wasn't the commercial, because I could relate to the farmers because
Right.
that's where I grew up. But yeah, then I got into selling homes for the builder, and I sold out all of his inventory, and this was like 1990, and then your commission, and once you sell the inventory, you don't have any more money, and so that that didn't work very well for me. It worked well for a period because I made good money, and then the guy couldn't keep up. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did you have any people responsibility during those years, or were you more of an individual contributor in those real estate investments?
just I owned a duplex, and then I was just a broker for both the commercial guy and the residential builder.
Yeah.
Um, and then I ended up opening my own office. It was ERA, um, and I thought, boy, I'll do well. Well, I didn't understand the dynamics of business very well,
Mm.
and I hired all these people because the franchise said hire all these salespeople. Well, the salespeople were costing me monthly. Um, Remax was just coming around at that time, and the sales guys kept costing me money. And I still remember I made my full calendar year like 119,000
That's a
in.
lot of money back then.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it was over 100. I kept 19,000, which put me at the poverty level. And so my take home was 19,000. I'm like, okay, I did better in college
Yeah. Right.
hustling. And then I hired a coach to come in. He had me fire everybody except three guys.
Wow.
And he said, you need to downsize and get rid of the franchise. I did that. And then like the next year I made almost 200 grand.
Nice. Nice. Well,
And,
that sounded like that consultant earned his keep.
oh, huge, huge. That's why I tell people, I go pay for advice. And they go,
Right.
I can't afford it. And I go, you can't afford not to pay for advice.
I love that. What do you think you learned about leadership during those early years?
Well, in the military, great training.
Yeah.
The culture is different than in the for-profit. So culture in the military, you have HR, you have finance, you have the law department. I'm generalizing, but
Right.
you have all those subcategories that support your mission, and we're all working together, and everybody has a very clear scope of work. Then I got into doing the real estate sales. Well, they're all independent contractors.
Right.
So you don't really tell them to do anything. And so it went from one extreme to the other. And in hindsight, it was a real dumb strategic move to do what I was doing. Um, but then when the coach worked with me, and then all of a sudden he's like, Rob, you can control yourself. You're a hard worker. You're you're good at studying. You understand sales. You understand finance. You need to just go out and sell. And in fact, he wanted me to fire everybody. But I like the three people. And really, I ended up only keeping two of them. The one guy that I liked, he just wasn't producing. Finally, he left. And then my assistants. And so I had a couple assistants. And but yeah, for leadership, I learned what worked, and then um, learned the hard way of trying to take one set of skills and try to utilize them for an application that wasn't made for. So military officer skills don't really fit with running a independent office like that.
Right.
Um, so I really didn't. And then from there, I went into real estate development, and um, I adjusted my leadership to working with subcontractors and vendors. So from hiring really good attorneys to hiring engineering firms, design firms, the trades, working to hire, um, like the best people to do work for me. But, you know, even at that, like the most number of people I had in my development company employed were 5,
Right.
even though we were doing millions of dollars in volume. So the volume per person was very high, which was
Right.
great. And so the numbers started work in my favor at that point.
And you made ultimately a pivot, though, out of real estate. And I want to hear a little bit about that because that leads us obviously to Exodus. But it started with the Guiding Light mission. Tell us about how you kind of came to a point in your career where it made sense to kind of move away from your real estate and investments or your success there and get into your mission work.
um, Really, it did. It's funny you say makes sense. Uh, it it was not by plan. It was October 2007, and I went early on a Saturday morning to get our quad runner batteries brand new ones. We had 6 quad runners, had 4 kids, and my wife and I. So went early, got there before it opened, and then it opened, got my batteries. I'm coming back, and I see this guy that says, "We'll work for food." And it was one of those October days in Michigan that the gray matches the sky. I mean,
Mm,
it's you know um, sprinkling out, and it's about 50 degrees, so it's just miserable.
right.
So I just felt a need to pull over and say, talk to him, and I said, "You really work for food?" He goes, "Yep, I just got it. I'm a felon. I went to prison. I can't get a job, and I don't want to go back to the rescue missions." And so I ended up, I told him, I said, "If you're here on Monday after my lunch meeting, I'll pick you up. I'll put you in housing, and I'll put you to work for my development company, but I'll
Mm,
pay you. I mean, I'm not gonna, do this for free." Um, and went to Sunday, went to church, and I just prayed to God he wasn't going to be there. Um, I did.
right. Right.
I mean, I had just gotten bought out from my finance company from we finance mobile home dealers. So, and then I had my developments going, 4 kids. Heck, I'd go on, hunting trips to Alaska, or fishing trips to Alaska, hunting trips to um, Newfoundland for moose and caribou in Canada, and
You
then
had a nice life.
cruise. So I'm like, hey, I don't need this crap. And sure as heck, he was there Monday. after
Yeah.
my lunch appointment. So I started with him. After about 10 days, I thought I was being the white knight helping him. And then after about 10 days, he was working at my house on a Saturday because I needed a extra hand. My kids were younger. And I said, hey, Tim, can you help me? And he goes, that'd be great. I'm bored on Saturdays and Sundays. So, and started hearing his story. And all of a sudden, I'm like, you know what? God put him in my life for
Hmm.
me, not.
Hmm.
And I realized if I had grown up the way he grew up, unlike with my parents, um, I could have been very easily homeless.
Yeah.
And so I got a deep respect for the guy. Learned homeless people are not lazy. They're not
No.
stupid. Um, all these things that you judge a person on.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden I'm like, this guy's really a talented fella. He
Hmm.
was very talented in areas that I wasn't with the workmanship. And I've been swinging hammers since I was a kid. So um, very impressed. But after about 8 weeks of working for me and taking him to church with my family on Sundays, he started drinking heavy.
Hmm.
And I said, hey, that's, you know, sorry, but I can hook you up with a guy for Guiding Light Mission. And so I knew a board member, and that's how I got connected with Guiding Light, as I actually took Tim to the board member's office, and the board member says, hey, you want to go down to Guiding Light? I go, nope, my truck doesn't. I don't point that direction, man. I said, I just had no need for it. And then Tim called me 2 days later and says, hey, they say I need a mentor. And I said, oh, that's great. Well, I'm slow and dense. And
Right.
so he goes, I want you to be it. I'm like, no, man, I don't want to be your mentor. He says, well, I'm leaving then. And well,
Hmm.
now I've become friends with the guy.
Right.
So I end up becoming his mentor. Ended up getting asked to be on the board like 5 times at Guiding Light, turned them down all 5 times. And then they invited me for a luncheon. One of the guys did his testimony, and his mom was a teacher. And
Hmm.
this guy was a well-known disc jockey in town. And so I'm like, oh man, I could have, because I like to drink and
Yeah.
drive cars. When I was teenage, we did the rotors on the back roads, which is not legal anymore. It wasn't legal back then, but I thought, boy, I could have gotten caught like this fella. And he went into drugs. I never did that stuff, but um, and so I said yes. Then I was on the board for about 7, 8 months. And the board, it got disclosed that the Guiding Light was in financial trouble. The executive director at a meeting I was at, our board meeting, ends up there was some things that wasn't getting communicated, and I said, hey, we just need to communicate them. Somebody else says, yep, you told the executive director, you have to communicate this stuff. This is a serious situation we're in. And the guy just looked at everybody and goes, well, I'm resigning. And
Wow.
so we left, and I figured, hey, Tim's gone by this time. He's left the mission for drinking. And then I figured, hey, I did my God thing. I've checked the box, and they're going to just close up, sell the building, pay off the note. And I figured I was good. And I went out to my truck to get in it to go, and 3 board members came up to me and they said, hey, you know who should run this place? And I'm serious. I am so totally dense, and my mind was not in that arena at all. I just and they go, we think you should. And
Wow.
I had stepped in and led them in the long-term strategic plan. When we had a consultant that was doing a bad job, and finally I'm like, guys, this guy's horrible. I mean, I know we've paid him. We're just write it off. I mean, it's just, this guy's horrible. We need to really do a strong SWOT analysis, and we need to be looking at a 1-year plan, 90-day, 30-day, what our brand is. I mean, we need to launch into this whole thing. This guy was kind of guiding us through. I think he had read it in a book, and so I led them through that. And then they said, well, we need a business guy because we could end up closing down.
Yeah.
And so I stepped in, and as an interim, I said, hey, I got to still be able to handle my business. I said, fair enough. But I stepped in, and within 3 weeks, we were out of money to pay the electric, the water, and payroll. So I was all set to, I was ready to bail a lot of times. I said, hey, I told my wife, I said, great, I'm going to be the business guy that closes down the rescue mission. And she goes, I don't think that's what God has in mind for you. I said, honey, there's no money. Like the water company said, once the power shut off, they legally can shut off our water. So, I mean, that's the call I received. I mean, this isn't, and I'm sorry, it's going to, potentially it's probably going to be in the newspaper. It's going to, not look good to our family. And you asked me about being brought up, the brand and name's important, reputation. So I'm getting ready. I've written my resignation letter. I'm proofreading it. Guy comes in our program, knocks on the door, and he says, hey, Mr. Munger, I'm just stopping in to let you know I'm staying in the program. I was going to leave and go out drinking, but you care about us. I said, well, and I like the other fellows cared about you. He goes, no, you cleaned up the whole place. And because I was, in the military, when you don't have anything to do, you're either cleaning, painting, something.
Right.
And so there was a bunch of paint and they had put the previous people, leadership had put the cleaning supplies on auto order. So I literally had I think a
warehouse full.
Yeah, like a 15 by 20 foot room full of wax cleaning supplies.
Oh my gosh.
So I had all the guys. I mean, the place was looking spit shine, and I'm like, oh, great. And he says, can I pray us out? And I'm like, oh boy, now I feel like a jerk. So he prays us out, and I'm proofing my resignation letter, and the bookkeeper comes in, and she goes, hey, want to let you know, I double checked our PO box, and I just got back here. We never get mail here, but we just got like $38,000.
Wow. Talk about a godsend.
Oh yeah, I was ready to push send. I mean, so
that's great. Well, now, how did Guiding Light evolve into Exodus Place? Bring us up to date.
Well, what happened with that was I was driving by this building that's now Exodus Place, and what happened was I would go to the Y with the guys and work out with them, and saw this building with my real estate background, did some checking. It was the old Michigan Department of Corrections halfway house, and it had been vacant for a couple of years. And then through networking contacts I had gained at, stepping in at Guiding Light, was able to get Hobby Lobby was going to look at buying the building and then donating it to Guiding Light.
Wow.
The building had flooded because the fire suppression system had froze. They had winterized the normal plumbing. They didn't winterize the
fire system.
Yeah, and I went and showed it to our board. I said, hey, this is our next step because we need to be in transitional housing to cure homelessness. And they looked at it and they go, Rob, you just got us out of the fire. We're still in the frying pan.
Yeah.
And I said, no, we can do it. I mean, we pay like $100 a month, and then after 13 months, we pay them another 100, and they give us the deed. It was like a tax. I don't understand the full tax ramifications for Hobby Lobby, but they could give and they could make a, write off.
Yeah.
And so the board said, we see your vision, but it's too big of a lift, even at free, so we're going to pass.
Wow.
So I turned in my resignation 2 weeks later. I said, hey, this has all been good. Thank you. Really appreciate all the board members and all their help. But I said, it's a whole lot nicer going to the Ritz-Carlton than downtown where there's smelly people and a lot of rough things, things that you wish you didn't experience down there, and just hurt, mental hurt, physical hurt. And so I thought, hey, did my God thing, check the box. I'm like, I'm really good now because saved the rescue mission, um, clear conscious. I'm out 2 weeks later to dinner with my wife, and all of a sudden I started crying. And okay, ex-Army officer, ground pounder, finance. I'm not like a super emotional type of fella, and I'm not a kumbaya. Exodus is not run as a kumbaya place. We have KPI and we have a dashboard, and we're measuring outcomes, and finances are real. They're not just something that we hope and wish over. And so I just looked at my wife and I said, I just felt like the Holy Spirit, God's telling me I'm supposed to do this. So I ended up starting Exodus in July 2009. Ended up being with 4 homeless guys that had been at Guiding Light. Said, hey, we believe we've seen what you've done here.
We'll follow you there.
Yeah, and I said, but you don't understand. All of my line of credits are gone because that's the meltdown of the real estate market. I have banks all over me. Doesn't matter how much equity you have. There are banks that they just called the note because they didn't want to be in real estate anymore. They didn't care if it was performing or not. It's just nope. And so I said, I got some pressures in my life. And then we're doing guys, so we're not cute and cuddly like babies or kittens or dogs or and I said, so we're probably most likely going to fail at this whole thing. And they're like, do you need an ink pen to sign the agreement?
What can we do to help, huh?
Yeah.
I love it.
So,
I love it. And now 14 years later and going strong. How many men do you house?
We have 135 men in the facility today.
Awesome.
I have 40 staff.
Nice. Nice ratio.
Yeah, it's just fantastic organization, fantastic staff and leadership there. And it was hard. I mean, you talk about leadership and leading somebody that is homeless. The greater portion of the people are reactive, so they're not a tactical or strategic person. So, and they're not even a task orientated. So
very transactional. Yeah.
Yep. So to lead that group in a successful way was really like my coup de grace, is my challenge of now I know you could put me into any organization and I've seen the dynamics in each level of an organization and how they're supposed to work. And so it's very easy for me to lead organizations and lead projects now.
Yeah, love it. And financing, did you get charitable donations? You didn't rely on your lines of credit. Did the Hobby Lobby thing come through? How'd you get that, all going at that stage?
Hobby Lobby, I contacted them and I said, hey, you got to be like a 5-year nonprofit for us to even look at, because for us to do our thing, it has to get through the sniff test with the IRS, plus you need to be doing audits, and so that was gone. We were always a hybrid model. I said, like my parents, were always, hey, you got to work for what you get. And so they, once we got the building cleaned up and painted and somewhat functional, everybody had to pay something to live at Exodus.
Mm.
And if you don't have any money, that's fine, but you have to come in and be working there. You can't just come in and flop. It's
Right.
different than like a rescue mission or a soup line. You show up, they'll feed you. You show up, they'll put you in a bunk for the night, and there's nothing expected of you. Here, we're a hand up and not a handout. So you can come in for free, but dang Skippy, you're going to get a
You have your
shower.
tasks.
Yeah,
Right.
you'll get a shower and you'll get brand new clothes, brand new used clothes, and you'll get a nice bed with nice sheets. You'll get a key to get into your room. But if you're thinking you're going to get there and lay on your bunk and play video games on your iPhone or smartphone, that's you get invited out real quickly.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Rob, we're just about out of time. It's been a fascinating story, but we always ask one last question of our CEO guests, and that's, what kind of life advice and career advice would you give to someone that maybe has their eyes on their own corner office someday?
Culture. That's one of the things. Treating people as humans. It's easy to get into the dashboards and the KPIs, but to look past that and see people as humans, and then controlling the culture.
Mm-hmm.
Leadership is 100% responsible for culture. And if you're a leader and you say you aren't responsible, well, then you're making yourself a victim, and victims are the weakest link in a whole chain. So the objective is I believe strong leadership stems with ensuring that there's a really strong positive culture that can be duplicated and then shared, and like we have an avatar of the ideal employee that works at Exodus. So we're always looking at improving our culture, improving our employees so that we have the best outcomes as a team.
Yeah, that's great. Robb Munger is the president and CEO of Exodus Place. Exodus is a facility for men coming out of difficult life situations based in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Their objective is to help restore the lives of men that have been faced with almost hopeless situations. They provide affordable housing, offer mentoring, counseling, encouragement, assistance with employment resources, Bible studies, and fellowships. They believe in offering a hand up, not a handout. Robb Munger, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thank you. This was a blessing.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.